Hello and welcome to the MSP Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Gillette. Listen, today's interview is such a doozy. I got to meet with John Davenjay from Bowman Williams. He is one of the most inspiring careers of anybody who I've ever interviewed before. And you'll see all the way through the interview, what I took away is that this guy does everything the hard way and he just does it right. There was something that he said that I extrapolated that might become a new mantra of mine. Do it right, do it well, do it over and over again. And he gives some really practical advice all through this sort of story of his career of how to make something out of nothing. And then if you need to generate some new revenue before you can start your first sales hires, he helps you with that. If you're ready for a sales hire or you think you might be ready for a sales hire, he helps you with that. So listen, there's a lot of advice. This might be one worth pulling over and taking some notes. So wherever you're at, buckle up. Mr. John Davenjay, dude, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brian. Excited to be back.
Yeah, you and I did a course together for not too long ago, talking about hiring and all that stuff, and I'm sure some of that stuff will come up today. But I thought it'd be cool because you've been in the channel for a while. You're actually, depending on who you ask, you're kind of a fixture of the channel.
Yeah.
But if people haven't come across sort of what you do, they might not have any idea who you are.
Probably right. Yes.
But also when people are on the top of these big, powerful organizations, sometimes it's really hard for us to know how they got there. And we sort of assume they've always been there. And I'm guessing the average listener probably has a lot more in common with you and your career history than they might expect. So I would love to just, for starters, why don't you tell us who you are, what you're doing right now, and then I want to ask you some questions and kind of go back a ways.
Sure. Yeah, I own a company named Bowman Williams, and we exclusively staff IT managed service providers. In fact, our tagline is Bowman Williams Staffing MSPs. Been doing that for 15 years. Before I started the company, I was part of a startup MSP in Frederick, Maryland. And now we operate in 8 different cities. We do permanent placement only, and our whole shtick is all of the candidates that we present to our clients have MSP experience. So they've worked in an SLA-driven environment. They can juggle the pace. They can juggle supporting multiple external environments. We put all our candidates through this MSP predictive index that we've created and refined over the last 15 years. And then we have over 900 MSP clients around the country. And we earn over 70% repeat business. In fact, it was almost 80% last year. It's something I'm quite proud of. But yeah, that's us, man. Permanent placement, staffing exclusively for MSPs.
So there's the, I don't mean to embarrass you or anything, but that's sort of the monolith of achievement. Okay. And I want to go backwards though, because we were just talking right before we turned the mics on. You were telling me about some stuff you sold before. Tell me about how did you get, what was the earliest sort of sales or professional career that you got into? Talk to me about where you started.
Sure. It's a real weird one. People kind of look at me cross-eyed when I tell it. When I was in college, I landed a job at Vector Marketing. And I was one of those crazy guys that would essentially go door to door with a big bag of kitchen knives. And I would go into people's homes and I'd try and sell them Cutco knives. But the set at the time cost $805. It was not an easy sale. I absolutely loved it. Still today, one of the best jobs I ever had. I was number 2 out of 50,000 people the year I was selling knives. And then I franchised that business the next summer when I was at college as a 4-month gig. We were the number 1 new office out of 400 that opened. And it basically set the tone for the rest of my life with selling knives. And the reason it did is because I had a script and I recorded, her name was Ann Tasato. I think that was her last name. I recorded her and I typed up exactly what she said verbatim in 11. It was really tiny font. And it was, I memorized the whole thing. And guess what? I did exactly what Ann did. And I got the exact same results. In fact, when I finished number 2, she was number 1. So that taught me about the sales methodology and like the psychology of it. And there was psychology to everything she was saying and how she was saying it and the order she was doing it and the way she laid things up. And it taught me a lot. And then, so, yeah, I guess I parlayed that into, selling people.
So you rather than starting from scratch, needing to be the hero of the whole process and figuring it all out, you went to somebody who did that for you. You borrowed it, you got advice, you got help, and then you emulated her results.
That's exactly right. And and then after college, I worked for an MSP, and then I went to a large staffing firm, and I did the exact same thing at the large staffing firm. His name was Matt Smith. Shout out to Matt Smith. He's amazing. I would literally copy his hand movements and how he would talk and what he would do. And I ended up doing pretty good at that too. So yeah, man, I'm big on stealing people's styles and words. It works.
And before we keep going further, I want to go back a little bit more. You said selling Cutco knives was the best job that you ever had. Is that what you just said?
It's one of the best jobs.
You said you loved that job. Why did you love that job?
I love that job. I'll put it to you this way. I had t-shirts made for like 230 or 50 reps that I had, the Samurai franchise, that it said "Changing Lives with Knives." And we actually took over the worst territory for selling knives at the time. It was PG County, Maryland. And I was previously selling knives in Fairfax, Virginia, Northern Virginia. And like the average order for a knife set was much higher than PG County. And I found that I made, I was putting these bag of knives into people's hands, but I was also kind of giving them the same experience that I had, about like the feeling of success at a young age. Most people are like 18 to 22 selling these knives, and gave them purpose, gave them goals. And that's not always easy to find in life in general, but especially it's hard when you're like 18 to 22. So it was very rewarding. Very rewarding.
So it was rewarding. Changing lives with knives is absolutely perfect. We talk about that, so one of my marketing kind of frameworks is something I call the connection chart. And essentially when you're selling something or when you're telling a story to somebody in the sales process, you can climb up this chart. The bottom of the chart says do, and the top of the chart says who. And in the middle, there's think, feel, need, want. So this lowest level of connection you can build is this is what my product will help you do. And the highest level of connection is this is who my product will help you become. And if you can associate your product with a lifestyle, an identity, a status, then you can sell way more consistently with way less effort and for way more money. Because people will buy status, but they don't really like buying outcomes. As much as people think outcomes are an important part, but outcomes it's like the lowest level, right? Of hey, you can chop tomatoes without them mushing underneath your knife. That's great. That's the simplest way to sell a sharp knife. But there's a lot of knives that can do that. But I was just talking to somebody about Cutco who said it's like the best company in the world. And he was like, I took my mother-in-law's knives that she bought 30 years ago. I didn't even buy them, and got them sharpened for free.
Yeah.
And they'll last another 30 years.
That's right.
And so when you buy a Cutco knife, you go from being a person who buys short-term solutions to a person who invests into the legacy of cooking in their family. Like you could go from a family who eats out to a family who eats well.
Yeah, right.
And forever. You're a family who eats well forever because you have the right tools to cook well. You can cook effectively, healthy, quickly, whatever, safely. You see what I mean? Like that's how I would probably sell it. So I love that whole I love changing lives with knives. You're not only changing the lives of your customers, but you are using it as a mentorship tool to change the lives of your employees.
That's right.
Oh,
that's right.
So you're a purpose-driven guy, it sounds like.
I think it's fair to say that. I've always liked the sales job. Ever since that, I've always liked sales because you always know where you stand and you're controlling your own destiny. It's a double-edged sword. Right. But when you subscribe to it, resign yourself to it, I think it's a great way to have a career.
Man. Yeah. Okay. So you're selling knives, and then you go, oh, I know the natural next step for me is IT. What? No. How did you?
Yeah.
What? Tell me about that transition, and then tell me more about what you were doing with your mentor there.
Yeah, sure. So the transition from my first professional job, in the workforce. All right. So my first professional job, I ended up, to toot my own horn, I had, I don't know, it was almost a dozen offers out of college, and because they loved the Cutco experience. It was all sales jobs. The job I took paid the lowest. I had no health benefits. It was working in a basement for somebody else. And the reason I took it is because it was a very entrepreneurial environment. They're just getting the company off the ground. And not only would I be like boots on the ground, I get to grow with the company. I get to work close to the top, even though I was hired at the bottom. And that job was working for an MSP, Computer Frontiers, Barbara Keating and Omar Noor. And they were beautiful, amazing people. And I sold managed services. First, we sold telephony, and then we went back to our clients and we sold them managed services because the telephony was riding on the data network, right? And that went well. And then I joined a staffing firm, stayed there for 2 years, and then I married the two together, staffing MSPs. But the interesting part of that story, and I think you'll get a kick out of this, when I first decided to go off on my own doing staffing, I didn't know I was going to do MSPs. I was doing just generic staffing, anyone that could hire an IT person, whether it was like software, coding, development, permanent placement. It didn't matter where they were, what they did, I would find it and I would do it. Didn't work. I lost everything I had, all my savings. My mom was coming over and doing my laundry. I was skin and bones, and I was still cold calling, and I just happened to call an MSP. I called Entiva, called Stephen Fradkin. He cuts me off, excuse me, invites me into his office. I'm talking to Stephen, and Stephen's like, stop right there. That's not what I want. That's not what I'm going to pay. You're going to find me field techs that are like a level 2 systems administrator that are experienced supporting multiple small to mid-size IT environments, doing break fix IT support. And I'm not going to pay you that. I'm going to pay you this. I'm going to pay you a flat rate of $10,000 per hire. And he's like, if you could do that for me, I'll hire 5 people a year from you. And he did. So at the end of that meeting, Stephen had basically whittled down our relationship to exactly what his ideal version of a staffing partner would be. But I had a contract that anyone that did what he did would likely see value in that same service. I went back to my desk. I called Marissa Withers over at Data Prize and left a voice message. And I swear to God, it was the first time I got a call back in 12 months. And Marissa said, Scott Gordon, the CEO, or maybe COO at the time, I think he's the CEO. She goes, Scott Gordon hasn't worked with a staffing firm in 14 years, but he's curious to know what you have to say. And after that, we've been off to the races, grown 30, 50% ever since. And it's all because, well, one, I hung in there, but 2, because I happened to call Steven and he gave me the great idea.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So there's so much to pull out of this through the lens of the listener of this podcast. You're hearing a guy who's clearly got skills. You clearly have an aptitude for sales. You've got a personality for sales, but I don't want to take away from your accomplishments and be like this is the first thing I want to highlight. If you're listening to this going, yeah, but that's that guy. That guy can get those results because he's that guy. But I'm just to this, or I don't relate because of this, or I can't make calls because of this. I just want you to stop for a second and realize John's path was not linear. Like you just said, you were killing it. And then you were like, oh, I'm out of money again. Mom's doing laundry. I'm eating half a can of Campbell's a day.
That's right.
And my point is that the path to success, there's no such thing as a linear path to success. But when you have the right set of skills and mindset and work ethic, I actually feel like success is inevitable. You know what I mean? But I just wanted to illustrate that if you're hearing this and feeling like, if you're discrediting or disqualifying yourself from this story, you got to realize that if you're feeling down or if you're feeling deflated, that just means you're in one of those valleys. But listen, the only people who fail are the people who just stop. You know what I mean? The people who die in the valley of the shadow of death are the ones who lay down in it. But if you just keep walking in it, you won't die, because not every valley doesn't last forever. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a valley. There's mountains all around it. So I just wanted to throw that out, and I didn't even sound too woo-woo there, but like, first of all, I wanted to say that. Second of all, let's go back to something else you said. You had 12 offers. You took the one who paid the least and was the least prestigious.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I did.
Now, you're in staffing now, and I'm sure you hear this kind of excuse from people like that staffing is so hard, or that we're in a down staffing market, or talent isn't what it used to be, or whatever, or people who can't seem to attract and retain talent. And they keep trying to throw more ping pong tables and higher salaries at the situation, but they can't retain anybody. But here you are, top performer, number 2 in the nation, and you took the lowest paying offer. Say more about that from the perspective of somebody who's trying to get somebody to join their team.
You mean, how to attract talent, how to get them excited?
Yeah,
sure.
Right, because clearly those guys who attracted you knew that a higher offer wasn't even necessarily the right thing to offer you, but they offered you something that brought you in.
That's right. Actually, it's something that you talked about. It's like selling the status. And to me, I take interviewing really seriously. I like to write about it. I like to talk about it. I talk with my clients about it. And the ones that do it well, kind of like how I took that script from Ann Tejano and copied it, like interviewing and sourcing and recruiting and hiring and retention is basically the same thing. There's a playbook out there. You just got to do it, and you got to do it right, and you got to do it well, and you got to do it over and over again. What got me excited about that job was talking about, not so much, we cover the day to day, but it's more about talking about like what got me excited. What did I want to experience? What did I want to do? What's going to make me feel content in this job? And then when they throw back their description of what this job and this company is going to be, they're sprinkling elements of the things I said I wanted to do into it. Right? They're getting the answers to the test at the beginning by saying, "Hey, John, what gets you excited? What do you want to do on a daily basis? Where do you get the most intrinsic reward? Where do you see yourself in 12 months, 3 years, 5, right?" And then they're sprinkling these elements. So the reason they did a good job probably, and what translates to this conversation, is being able to uncover the things that's going to make that candidate genuinely feel content and excited to join and bought in. You have to be able to actually provide those things to them. But then you got to go ahead and throw back like, "Here, you have a career track." I think a lot of candidates in the MSP industry end up leaving because they don't know what's in store for them. Chances are, if they had a more regular conversation with their hiring manager, or just the manager, the CEO of the MSP, they probably get a lot of those answers. But they don't know. They're flying in the dark. So it starts in the interview process and being able to lay out a career track for someone, talk about the trajectory of the company and how this person we brought into that, right?
It's so powerful. Like, salespeople are so great at recruiting because salespeople realize that recruiting is selling, right? Like,
that's right.
Actually, eventually you'll learn that everything is selling. And everybody who ever like got a problem solved is because somebody somewhere sold something. You know what I mean? It's so critical that you realize that sales is not a necessary, it's not an evil, it's not self-seeking. Sales is an intrinsically, inherently noble and essential part of culture, not just business. But that soapbox over. When you're hiring for a salesperson, this is critical for the MSPs who are listening. When you're hiring for a tech, you got to realize, what do technologists want? They want reliability, right? They want clarity, and they really want consistency. Now, people who are in tech, what's exciting about tech is that it always changes. But in reality, these are tradespeople. They're white collar mechanics. They want to do the same job that they know how to do. They want furthered education, right? So if I'm hiring a technical person, I'm going to be like, here's how we're going to educate and support you and like upskill you as a professional. Here, you're going to get routine, stick around and do the job, and you'll get a salary raise every year. But they want to know, how much money am I going to make? And when do I get a raise? Salespeople, they're not like that. Consistency is like the lowest on the totem pole for a good salesperson. They don't want consistency. They want opportunity.
Yeah, that's right.
So when you go to a sales guy and you say, "You'll make this much money a year, go find me business." And then they say, "How are you going to support me?" And they go, "Well, that's your job." You just completely killed that person's whole vision of where they could take this thing.
That's right.
Salespeople want to be the hero of the story, and frankly, they should be. Like, they're the one padding your retirement account if you own the business. So let them feel autonomy. Let them feel a sense of ownership over the business they're building. Let them feel like a mini boutique entrepreneur underneath your umbrella, almost like you're franchising, and show them, you just said, a career track. Don't just say there's room for improvement or room to grow. Be like, this is what we want to do. In the future, we'd like to have people who are underneath you. We'd like you to report directly to the CEO. And so your title could evolve and change as your responsibilities evolve and change you build out your team. So you could go from account executive to senior account executive to sales manager to VP of sales to chief revenue officer in 5 years. And this is how we want to help you do it.
That's right. Taking that one step further really quick, it's something I adopted from another MSP who did it really well. So painting the picture, that's an important part of it. But then translating it also, excuse me, in the offer letter, this MSP, and now I've adopted it, I've been doing it for 15 years. When they extend a job offer to a candidate, this MSP would say, here's your starting salary, here's your guaranteed second year salary, and here's your third year salary. And it was guaranteed. And that way that person would know, if I just by sticking around, I'm guaranteed to see myself increase. So when they get the offer, if they're a 60K candidate, they're not going to see 60K. They're going to see, oh, end of 2 years, I'm making, 62,500 or 65, or in 3 years, 70,000. And then there could be other ways of, building in comp. But the point is they know what they're working towards, and they see that irrespective of your assessment of me and my performance and what I know, I'm guaranteed to get that pay increase. And that's immensely powerful. But
and those like hollow point being that a hollow, vague promise to let them grow.
Right. Yeah.
Salespeople are professional BS meters. That's our job, is to know when people are lying. Like salespeople know a hollow promise when they hear it. Right?
I would think so. Yes, they should.
So when you go, yeah, you know what? Hey, if you do well, stick around. There might be some great new stuff for you.
Yeah.
That translation is, I've got no idea how to manage or incentivize you. And I'm really hoping that you'll just solve all these problems for me. And that that's in business, that's called magical thinking.
Yeah.
Magical thinking means I'm not going to take any action and I'm going to assume that I'm going to get the outcome I'm looking for because things will just work out. Anyway, this is super helpful, I think, for anybody who's trying to grow the sales team.
Yes.
Look, you need a first rep. Your first rep has to be great, but there's no such thing as a first rep who doesn't need support. You know what I mean? Who doesn't need any infrastructure, who doesn't need a plan. If you're going to attract somebody who's attracted to opportunity, there has to be tangible growth. And then you've got to have a real strategy to be able to follow up on those promises, right? But anyway, I think this is super helpful. So you went in MSP, you went into staffing, and then you realized, oh, wow, MSPs need staffing.
That's right.
And Bowman Williams, so did you, tell me about the origin of that, of how you really started it.
How I really started it. I had a business partner at the time. My middle name is William, John William Davenjay. And at the time I had a business partner. His middle name was Bowman. We put them together. That's Bowman Williams. And then he actually had a full-time job. And I started the company by myself. And he followed through on his promise. As soon as we had a couple deals come through, which took a year and a half, and the MSP thing started taking off, he joined. I realized his potential, and then I ended up relatively diplomatically buying him out. But that's how we started it. We pulled some money together, and he kept his job, and I bit the bullet, wanted the learning experience. I wanted to struggle, to be honest. That's to become like impervious to, the tough times, and you learn how to like get through them. And I wanted to do that. But that's how we got started. Yeah. It was rough go though. It was really rough.
Of course.
Yeah.
Was there, you don't have to get too personal or anything, but those grit forming chapters of your career, like there's no pretty way. I'll say it this way. There's no pretty way to develop grit.
No.
Right? It has to be ugly.
That's right.
And it's got to be painful. But for somebody who's in that moment, like, can you paint a little bit of a picture? What do you mean by it was hard?
Sure. Well, you go through phases. And I guess the best analogy I've come up with was like, if you're hitting a wall over and over again, by the 10th time, you might not be that much of a different person or see, the world differently. But by the 50th or the 100th time, you get very real about what you're facing. You get more creative, and you start to like take those successes and those losses, and it starts to mold like a lens to think through, and you start to just kind of view what you're doing a little bit differently. And you're a different person too, especially if this, if you're owning, this is your livelihood, your entrepreneur, you're getting a business off the ground, there's a lot more tied to it than just your ego. And so I feel like you'd kind of become another person by the 100th time you hit a wall and you stand up, you might see things differently. And luckily I felt like I did. I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think an entrepreneur can outsource that grit? Like, can they just hire the right person, build the right comp plan, align incentives to bring in somebody to do that dirty work, and they just reap the benefits? Does that work, do you think?
I think you have to know enough to be able to avoid the landmines and steer the thing in the right direction. I think you can pick up some base hits, but in the long run, if you haven't gone through the hard times and experienced how to be resilient and solve problems, you're not going to be able to translate that problem solving to the people that are underneath you, carrying out your message and your model. I think you got to, form it yourself, strike it yourself. I don't know. It's a good question. What do you think? I don't know.
I mean,
unless someone has like really deep pockets.
Right. That's just it,
You
right? Is like um, anything that you're not willing to do yourself, you're going to pay more to have somebody else do it. It's always actually
Right.
cheaper to, you know what I mean? To kind of do it yourself in theory, if as long as you are capable of doing it. But I think that, I don't know, I think that 90+% of people who start an MSP are technical, or maybe they have a finance background, but almost none of them have sales backgrounds. So they
Right.
go, okay, I don't want to, I don't want a boss anymore. I don't want a job anymore. And then they end up just, all they do is just make themselves a job, but they're not making as much and they're way more stressed out because
Right.
they get 6 clients. They start getting one a year from referrals. And now they're just beholden to all of these clients. And all they do is close tickets, solve problems, sell servers, 12 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day with full medical that they were doing in somebody else's job. And they sort
Yeah.
of tell themselves that this is freedom, but in reality, they've literally just made themselves a prison for their career because now they can't, now they're chained to this thing, right? And so, but they develop that technical grit. They're like, no, every IT guy knows they've been in the soup. Like, you're not a real IT guy until a server crashes Friday at 4:58 and there's 75 people who need to get this proposal out and everybody's looking at you and there's
Yeah.
there's 4-letter words and voicemails all like blowing you up and that's like any IT guy will tell you that's the real job or somebody's trying to hack you and you're like real time trying to lock them out. So they have that grit on the ops side. But I don't know, is it really possible for a founder who wants to bootstrap an MSP? They start with 2 or 3 hero clients and they want to get to 1 million or 2 million or 3 million, but they don't want to sell anything. They don't want to ever develop sales and marketing grit. They're afraid of confronting any of their inner demons, any of their personal fears. I wonder if there's an honest path out of that other than like 20 years and some luck.
Goes back to what got them in the game in the first place. I guess I think a lot of it is trying to figure out what you do well and then finding a way to replicate it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And otherwise, yeah, you're going to be beholden to those 6 clients. And I'm assuming someone's not going to start an MSP to just have 6 clients. That's probably because they want to go into it and they want to replicate what they do. But it's hard. I think replication of a model and unpacking what it is you do well and how you do it, systemizing it, creating that playbook, right? And then giving it to the right person and making sure they can carry it out. I mean, it's hard as hell. It's really hard.
There's no such like,
Yeah.
I'm fond of saying hard work is the easy part because in reality,
Right.
there's no such thing as like, we're in this like drop ship era, like drop ship, TikTok, freaking
Right.
whatever era where people are like, I make $100,000 a year for like yawning on camera. Like, okay, like the reality is if you want to build something that lasts and that's worth a damn that you can sell, hard work is literally inevitable. And actually there's nothing special about
Right.
you if you're working hard. And literally almost everybody in the world works hard. And the reality is I resigned to the fact a long time ago that I'm probably the least talented and laziest person. So I just have to assume there's somebody who's willing to do more work for less money with a better attitude. Always. That's what I
Right.
told myself. Somebody will always take your job for less money and they'll have a better attitude and be more contented by it. So like you can't use any of those. You can't just like feel entitled because you work 12-hour days. That doesn't entitle you to anything if you're not doing work worth doing. But I love what you said earlier. Do it right, do it well, do it over and over again.
Yeah.
So you've got it. Okay, you're trying to start an MSP, trying to build the sales process. Look, here's the reality. Until you can afford a salesperson, you're the salesperson, right?
Yes. Right.
It's you. So either sell or accept the fact that you are never going to grow bigger than you are, and maybe that's fine. Maybe lifestyle is okay for you. So I'm not trying to talk down on people who want. Look, I want to do 400K in gross. I want to pocket 200 of it, and until I'm good and done. And where I live, that's amazing, and I want to do that for 10 years, and that's enough for me. And I'm not throwing any shame there. But if you want to grow, you got to accept either you're going to have to sell this thing, or you won't grow.
That's right. Yeah. MSPs are really big into the benchmarking. They do the peer groups, right? They subscribe to the methodologies. And I think that's awesome. And then, if they subscribe to that kind of thinking, it's the same thing on the sales side, right? Like the point is that there's another MSP out there in a similar position or previously was in a similar position, and they found a way to do it. So I find a lot of solace in that, knowing that the answer's out there and it's not magic, and it's likely just a recipe and a playbook, and you just got to put it together and find the one that works for you. But yeah, I think replicating the model at that early start is a crucial launch pad in setting the tone for like your trajectory of your company, and finding people to do it. I feel like those first couple hires, especially on the sales side, I mean, a lot of success is going to derive or not derive from that first domino and putting it in place. Yeah. How much I know we talked about this last time, how much of a sales playbook should an MSP owner or a company have before they actually put their first salesperson into the seat? Like, what kind of a semblance of like the messaging and, the database and the prospects?
Yeah, I think it depends on who they're hiring. So if they're hiring a business development partner who's going to get paid well, maybe even's got they're on the cap table and they're like, I know how to grow businesses, I just need a product to sell, then the question is really a question for them. Like, how much control do you need over the process? I remember my 3 months in IT where I was temping for help desk for Carl's Jr. Oregon, and my buddy was the director of IT, and I was like I was archiving Outlook or something, but they hired a database manager, and she came in and she was like, what can't I change? And then I'm going to, just so you know, I'm going to change everything except for what you told me I can't change. And that stuck in my head, that people who know what they want, they know what they want. So if you want a biz dev partner, they might want to own or develop that process. But in reality, that's probably not your first hire. You're probably not trying to give 30% of your business away and pay a big aggressive salary to somebody. You probably want a business development rep, right? So the lower down the totem pole in sales career you're hiring, the more process has to be in place, to the point where if you're trying to get somebody to make dials for you and then you go on site, you have to have 100% of the process done before they start, or else they're literally guessing and figuring it out on your dime.
Exactly.
And
I totally agree with that.
So spend 60, 90 days, go read 5 books, go listen to download a bunch of free sales and marketing content. And if it's not working, look, I mean, we could tie it all back to this. If it's not working, you're either not doing it right, you're not doing it well, or you're not doing it over and over again.
That's right.
Because if you do it right, do it well, do it over and over again, it's going to work.
It's going to work.
I'm ordering. So my mantra, John, is this is going to work. And that mantra is like, it's very simple and it's honestly deeply meaningful to me. And I'm printing right now. I'm going to put it on a big 24 by 24 right here. Somebody on my team is making it for me right now. This is going to work as my mantra. And if it's not working, it's not because it's impossible. It's because I'm doing it wrong. And that just means that's fantastic information, But if you're doing nothing, then you're going to get nothing. If you're sitting around whining about it, all you're going to get is just more and more into the echo chamber of your own bitterness and despair. But you're not going to get results simply because you want them, right? Do it right, do it well, do it over and over again. So let's kind of land this plane. I want to talk about the 2 positions somebody might be in who's listening to this. First of all, you've got an owner who's maybe they've already accepted that they have to sell. Maybe they're kicking and screaming all the way through this interview, but they need to cross that chasm of basically generate enough business, book enough MRR so that they can hire a first sales rep.
Yeah.
Give me some like very tactical, visceral advice for somebody who's in that spot. What should they be doing right now?
You mean specifically like the playbook they're putting together so they can like documenting what they're doing well?
Or anything practical you can think of. MSP owner who's like, I got to get 10,000 MRR and then I can hire a salesperson and I've got to do it myself. Where do they start? What do they do?
Okay, so they're going to actually be the one selling in this scenario. So
yeah,
in that case, I think you got to identify what the triggers are for spotting the companies that are most likely going to be interested in changing MSPs or signing up an MSP. You can do that. I mean, you probably can tell them all about the ways to go about it, but like you can do the BNI networking route, email campaigns, the prospecting on the phone call list. In my opinion, there's no silver bullet to any of it. You have to do all of it over and over again, and you got to do all of it well. And then I think it's a lot about follow-up and execution, building that sales pipeline and being disciplined to do your follow-ups. And then along the way where I think like if I can add, shed any light and any value to that question, it's like the things they're getting ready to do, which is like they should be thinking about at the end of the day, when it's time to put that first person in the seat. You want it to be like, in my case, it was like, I have the lists of companies in there, I have like the pipeline kind of built. There's a way for new ones to go in. And I have the messaging word for word, including all the objections they can get. I want to role play it with my first hire. I'm going to tell them what the recipe is in phone calls and prospects, conversions. I'm going to work with them on that. So it's almost like once I do my training and I instill that, that confidence in them and I give them the tools, you're not going to ever turn a blind eye to it, but you want to feel like you can, because you've taken a recipe and thought through everything they could possibly experience and do. So while I'm going out there and trying to get to my first 10,000, I'm simultaneously documenting and working everything through so like I can give it to somebody else. Yeah. But that's a good question. I mean, what do you think? What's with someone super entrepreneurial in that position and they got to create nothing, create something from nothing? What do you think? I'm curious.
Yeah, I think you're right onto it there. Like find a methodology, find somebody to follow, like on LinkedIn, find people who've done it before, call MSPs. Dude, This is something people should do more. Call MSPs in different markets, totally different state, totally different time zone. Find the big MSPs. And let me tell you something about every CEO in the world. We all have egos and we all love being asked for advice.
We do. Yeah. It's so
true. We love it.
Yeah.
People will give you so much information if you frame it as a "can you help me" question.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with doing this? You're in Texas and you call somebody in South Beach, Florida, and you go, listen, we don't know one another. I'm not selling you anything at all, but listen, I want to start an MSP. I've been looking at people in other markets and I was really inspired by by your website, and then give them 2 or 3 specific compliments. So you've obviously figured a bunch of stuff out. You've been at this. Do you mind if I ask you, I've got 5 questions. We could do this on the phone, or I could email you the 5 questions. I would just love your advice on these questions.
Because it's been done. It's been done. You're not doing something that somebody's never done before. The answer's there.
Humble yourself. Do that. You could go to Tech Tribe, or you could go to those places too. But honestly, if you do it where people's advice is being read by others, sometimes it becomes very performative, and you start getting less and less honest answers. Because I have observed that like people on Tech Tribe, they just lie. I've done that. I've seen many times they say their numbers, then they call me for a sales assessment, and I'm like, oh, dude, you're flat out lying about how much you do in new sales on Tech. You're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
And you're lying to everybody else. So if you do it in private, right? And this is like, they get to mentor you for a 15-minute phone call. Do that 100 times if you have no idea what to do. But get some ideas and go, these are what I could do. Set them in order from easiest to hardest. And then you have to take action, and then just do it right, do it well, and do it over and over again. And that's it. That's what you need to do.
And replicating it. I would imagine you probably know more about this than I do, but going to your existing clients, asking for referrals. Hopefully they know someone else in the same industry. Let's say you're supporting, I don't know, a manufacturer, or it's maybe a law firm. They're going to know their law firms, and you can easily go to that new prospect, that referral, and say like, I have familiarity with supporting law firms. I know these are the likely issues you guys run into and the problems. Here's how I've solved them before. And I think that's probably, but the point is the answer's out there. Right. And it's just a matter of getting them. But
and remember, anybody will work harder than you for less money with a better attitude. So just take all those excuses away from yourself. Okay. And you either want this or you don't. And there's no wrong answer to that. The only wrong answer to that is the dishonest one. If you really want to grow, if you really wanted it, you would do what it takes to get it, And so the second piece of advice, let's say they found the 10,000 MRR, or maybe they've got some clients and they're like, it's time for us to take sales seriously. We need to build out a sales initiative or a marketing initiative. What advice do you have for that person who's looking for that first hire? Maybe they're trying to gauge like, how do we do this well? Maybe they probably tried once or twice with cold callers or whatever and interns, it didn't work. Any practical advice for those people?
Think the long answer would be talking about having a certain number of things in the playbook ready to hand to somebody. Because if you have that fleshed out, like, how to find prospects, how to get those leads in the door, how like the messaging should go, the objections, the number of days it takes from lead to close, right? That's going to drive the profile that you're going to hire. Mm-hmm. because the more it's mapped out, the less critical thinking you need. And then you just need a good vessel with a good track record on paper that shows they've sold a similar service to a similar client. They've done it for X number of years. They got great tenure. They got the numbers to back it up. And that's the person you would look for. And then the less of that playbook that you have, the more it's kind of like, well, I think this person could do it, because you don't have like a sounding board to bounce it off of.
Yeah.
When it comes to finding the talent, I'm a big fan of casting a wide net, kissing a lot of frogs, doing a lot of interviews, having a very systemized process for it. It should probably be really focused on numbers. It's uncomfortable, but you should probably role play during that interview. I know it's awkward, but you can really cut through a lot and see how people's like sales demeanorship will come through, and know how to sell the company in the position. But yeah, yep, it's very common. And just for some solace out there for anyone that's listening and is kind of in this position that we're talking about, I'm working with a 100-person MSP right now, working with the owner. They're doing a ton of benchmarking, and they're basically looking at putting a business development person into the seat. And because they're niche, they've got a lot of repeat business coming from the niche industry that they're catering their MSP services to, but they don't really have a sales force. And so they're almost starting from scratch. And you wouldn't think an MSP that's been around since 2013, 100 employees, they'd have it all figured out. They don't have it all figured out.
No,
they don't even have it all figured out, about the right person to hire, and how much of a playbook should we have ready to go, and the messaging and the sales ops. So
yeah,
you're not alone. You know what I mean?
It's wild, man. The $500,000 MSPs and $10 million MSPs, I talked to them in the same room, give them the same advice, and they're both taking the same notes.
That's right.
Because the reality is most MSPs have no clue how they got there. They don't know how they got to 10 million. They were like, it just kind of happened. And now that's how we don't know how to get to 20. We don't know how we got to 500K. So we have no clue how to get to 2 million. And hopefully, like with some of the stuff John was saying, if you feel like you're ready to have a sales hire, then start running those assets together, put it together, put as much thought into it as you would to hire your first tech. Have SOPs, have a PSA, have workflow rules, have ticketing policies, have service level agreements. You've got to have all that in order for a tech to even be able to do their job. Same exact level of degree for salesperson, because it's just as important for your business that you find new clients, that you know how to manage the ones that you have. Man, I mean, we sort of ended up with a plug for you at the beginning, but listen, if somebody wants to talk to you or goes, man, maybe I need some help placing because I've been interviewing for 3 months. I just met a guy who's been interviewing for 4 months, hasn't hired somebody. I've never had that experience in my life. And he just can't get somebody in place.
It's common, yeah.
I mean, how do they reach out to you, and why should somebody reach out to you, if at all?
Thank you. Reach out to us. You can find information about how we operate, who we are, bowmanwilliams.com. My name is John Davenjay. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can message me. You can email us or call us through our website. And the reason it might be worth exploring if you're struggling with hiring is because everything that we've put in place over the last 15 years is geared towards helping MSPs with 2 employees. I just helped a company in Chicago literally hire his first employee. So our pricing is aligned for small MSPs. We provide a guarantee, and all the candidates are going to have MSP experience. They'll all be delivered to you, so you can sit back and be picky and find the right culture fit and the one with the right tech stack. But that's how we're geared up. And that's exclusively, I exist to staff MSPs. So if you're struggling, we can probably help you somehow, some way. Yeah.
So fantastic, man. Thank you for what you're doing in the channel. I hope I'll see you at some of these conferences and stuff coming up. And,
me too.
We did a course together, like we talked about, for my membership. And it was like, just the advice is so practical. And I'm going to if you're not too bashful, I'm going to give you a compliment. What I'm taking away from the whole story of your career and the mechanism for your success is that you just do it the hard way. I mean, that's sort of been what I'm hearing from you all the way. Be detailed, be vigilant, and then just do it over and over again the hard way. And if you're out looking for silver bullets, you're never going to shoot anything, because
that's right.
Shoot regular bullets and fire a lot and get good at shooting, and you'll hit your target. If you just blow through the other ammo and just do it the hard way. And I feel that same way. It's like, I think success is actually pretty inevitable when you get your mindset right, you're willing to work hard, and you're willing to humble yourself. You can succeed. So I just wanted to say, congrats on everything you've done, obviously. And
thank you, Brian.
I'm excited to see where you end up in 5-10 years, what Bowman Williams becomes or what you do with it or whatever. But
thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I hope
Me
this
too.
was helpful to the listeners, and thanks again.